Hello, West Virginia Baptist Convention family. I'm David Holm, and we'd like to welcome you to Family Talks. My guest on Family Talks today is Pastor Jon Villers of the Philippi Baptist Church. In addition to being pastor, Jon serves in a lot of other roles as well. He's the interim chaplain at Alderson Broaddus University. He also teaches there. He leads BCM there. He's very active in the Barber County Ministerial Association. And if that weren't enough, he's currently working on his doctorate. So, Jon, amidst all those activities, we are really glad you're here with us today.
Great to be here. Wonderful.
Thank you. Really, what I wanted to talk about today, although we can talk about a few of those things later if you want, but I just know that the Villers family has a long ministry pastoral legacy. And maybe it started before your dad, but at least in my knowledge, your dad and you and now two of your sons. So can you just talk a little bit about that for us today?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's been a privilege to be in the Villers lineage there, at least for a little bit of time. And to go back to my dad, he started his journey in Calhoun County back in 1930. And there was a little community church there on Little Creek in Calhoun. And it was during a revival service that he went forward and met Jesus for the first time. And the revival preacher always promised him, and he was a local fellow there too, that he would baptize him. But it just never really happened right then. And so a few years went by, and he enrolled at Glenville State College and had to head out of Calhoun County over to the neighboring county of Gilmer. And so he just started, as he tells me the story, he walked down from the college, and the Baptist church happened to be one of the places in town that would give him some time to answer some of his questions. And so he sat down with that Baptist preacher and talked to him about how he said, well, I can baptize you if you want to be baptized, and ended up teaching Sunday school there while he was there as a student. And then after he graduated, he went on off to serve in the armed services. And then as he came back, though, he really felt a calling into ministry. I was asked Dad about that. I said, well, Dad, was it a specific kind of deal? I mean, how did you know it was God calling you? And he said, it's one of the only times I ever heard God audibly speak. But he says, I was back at our farm place there in Calhoun County, right there, not very far from the one-room schoolhouse and an area where he was saved. And he said, I was in the back room, and I just heard God tell me that I need you to go and preach. So he took his science degree. He got a science degree from Glenville State College, and all the upper sciences he ended up teaching down through his career as well. But he knew he needed to get some further studies in ministry. So while he was in the armed services, he was stationed over at Fort Knox in Kentucky, and he had an opportunity to be on a leave of absence and went to check out Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. And when he was over there, the taxi cab driver didn't really understand, I guess, where he was supposed to be going, and took him to the front door of the Walnut Street Baptist Church, which is not where Southern is located. But of course, Louisville's a little bit of a bigger place. But of course, he was dressed all in his Army outfit, and there was a dear couple, he said, that came out of the church and said, soldier, can we help you? And so they knew exactly where Southern was, took him over there, took a tour, and really the rest is history. After he got out of the services, he then enrolled at Southern. Not only did he get a degree at Southern, but that's where he found his Kentucky bride. He was pastoring a little country church, a little Baptist church there in Kentucky, and they connected. She was a social worker, and they both were a little older in years. They were in their 30s. And this dear lady in the church was playing matchmaker. And so she knew this eligible social worker in the community. And of course, her young, handsome pastor, she definitely wanted to fix him up with somebody. And so they ended up going to this lady's house. And this is where the story always got a little controversial. either mom fell off the porch or dad pushed her off the porch. I'm not sure which it is. Well, I guess we'll have to watch the reel in heaven, I guess, to really figure it out. But when he came back to West Virginia after his degree, they both settled, of course, there in Calhoun County, back in that area, and served faithfully there. 32 years he was at Rush Run Baptist Church, and then he picked up a couple others that were not quite as long, 27 and 22 years.
Oh my.
But bivocational ministry, did that. So it wasn't if we were going to church, it was just where we were going to church.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really, I liked church, and I knew Jesus was my savior too, but everybody said I was just going to be a little preacher boy. But I went to school to be an accountant, and I got a computer information system degree from AB. But the Lord also spoke very clear to me. Well, in fact, I'm sitting here at Parchment Valley, and it was just right over in the conference center, that it was a BCM retreat of all things. And Paul Morton, some of you may even remember Paul Morton. He was the Harley Davidson riding pastor here in West Virginia, and he made quite an impression on several of us young college students, I think. But he just encouraged us all. He says, if you don't have a specific call into a job like an accountant or a banker or a nurse, then you really need to consider ministry. And so that was very different than how Dad heard his calling. But for some reason, that just made sense to me. And I was dating Corrine at the time, and I turned to her, I said, Corrine, I think he's talking to me. And so we did. We got to go forward, and that was back when there were payphones. And so I got out, and I got on the payphone there behind the conference center, and it's one of the greatest calls I think I was ever able to make. I got to call Dad. And, So it different kind of callings, but certainly something that God has placed in our hearts. And then we raised 4 kids, and so you never know what your children are going to do, right? I mean, my dad had aspirations that I would be the next physician or something. He really had great plans for me, but I never really had much to do in terms of medical kind of training. And so for our children, we just said, well, what do you want to do? And, it was in their own exploration. Both Caleb and Bobby at different times, even in their lives, they said, well, I really feel God calling me. And so they're a little bit at the head of the game for both Dad and me. They decided to do that early on. I mean, they both went to AB and worked through their Christian studies degrees there. And it's just a wonderful blessing to see them both serving in ministry. Of course, Caleb is at Summersville Baptist Church. He's been the associate pastor of youth there for several years now. And then Bobby, in the midst of COVID, of all things, he couldn't graduate like he wanted to, no graduation. We didn't go to the BCM beach retreat. He was a part of the BCM for all 4 years. And, first time his girlfriend would have been able to go with him. I mean, all those kind of, last kind of things. And then like 2 months, he's got a degree. What do I do? And then, of course, of all things, First Baptist Glenville, one of the places where Dad was an interim pastor back when he started in ministry. Just, of course, Glenville State College, where he's an alum. And so they knew that he had some aspirations for ministry. And it's just a small sort of world, how all that is circled around. And Bobby is just really enjoying the atmosphere there and the opportunity to connect and serve as well.
That's wonderful. I tell you, the something else that Louis Villers and Jon Villers share is you are both recipients of the Ward Hibbs Award from Alderson Broaddus University, where they recognize a pastor and town and country ministry every year for their ministry and the work that they're doing. And so I want to say congratulations. But is it extra special to you because Louis Villers also received the Ward Hibbs Award?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ties to Alderson Broaddus, and I go back to that wonderful man who always did the circuit, the 25 associations, and that was back when AB would have somebody at every single one of them. His name was Harry Rowe.
Mhm.
and Harry Rowe would come around and tell us what was happening on top of that hill. And Dad was in 3 different associations. So when he pastored these churches, it's not like, he got called all at the same time. So one was in the Kanawha Valley Association, one was in the Harrisville Association, and one was in the Little Kanawha Association. I mean, so it was like, but we did the whole circuit. We were there. I think every time there was a meal, we were present, right? I mean, that's just a good Baptist thing to
Right.
do.
Amen.
So by the time Harry would finish his round, I could pretty much recite everything that he was saying about AB. So when it was time for me in 1985 to, go off to school, I did apply at Wesleyan, but there wasn't anywhere else, So of course I had heard about Ward Hibbs, even through that process. And then in 1994, when they actually asked Dad if he would, accept it, it was a beautiful thing. And we were all, it was at Charleston Baptist Temple, which is a little interesting. Corey and I then ended up serving there for 5 years later on. But we were there. The AB brass choir played out in the sanctuary, and then they put some up in the bell tower outside the building so that we would be sort of attuned to both of those. Just a neat kind of thing for AB being a part of that too. And of course, that's the largest church I think I'd ever been in my life at that point when we went to Charleston
Big one.
Baptist Temple, right? It's just because that's not our background. My dad's little churches, if we saw 30 on a Sunday morning at most of those churches, that's a good Sunday. Now revival, you could pack them out a little bit more, but that was sort of our main kind of connection there. But then and really, because of COVID and all that, I didn't even have a plaque of my own. So my niece had my dad's plaque from 1994 on her shelf. And
Oh,
it's actually the plaque that they gave me when we did the presentation at AB just a couple
wow.
of months ago.
Wow. How neat. How neat. Great stories and a great legacy of the Villers family. And I just, John, want to thank you for being with us today. But most of all, I want to thank you. Your dad touched an awful lot of lives during his lifetime in ministry. You've touched a lot of lives during your lifetime in ministry, and I look forward to seeing Caleb and Bobby do the same, which I know they already have and will continue to do. But God bless you as you continue your ministry. Safe travels as you travel back from Parchment Valley. But thanks so much again for your ministry and for joining us today.
Well,
And
it
for the
was a
rest of
privilege to
you,
be here.
thank you so much for being with us. And join us next time on Family Talks.